Welcome to another episode of SlushHeap. We're now in season 4, and I believe this is episode 5, if you're counting. But then who's counting anymore? And you know, I was going to say a lot of things in the beginning, but I'm going to save that for the middle of the show and the end of the show. So without saying anything else, let me turn this over now to my co-host, the beauty in this show. I'm the Beast, and let her make the introduction of our guests tonight. Darcie?
Hello, good evening.
You're on the hot seat.
I am. Welcome to SlushHeap. Actually, I'm going to correct Rudi, which he loves when I do that, but we're actually in season 4, episode 4, and we are in the 4th step of writing a book. So our series this season is How to Write a Book, and we are on the editing phase. We've brought in 2 wonderful guests that you are going to very much appreciate if you are really getting started with this. Editing can be a very overwhelming stage in many ways, trying to choose an editor, trying to afford the editor, trying to decide, you know, what to keep and what to take out based on their suggestions and your own feelings. So there's a lot to tackle tonight, and I expect we will have a lot of great answers. Tonight we have with us Annie Acorn of Annie Acorn Publishing. Hi, Annie.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
It's wonderful to have you. And beside her is Miral Sattar? Sattar. Oh. See, I asked her about the first name, but not the second. I apologize. She is very well known among the social media community, specifically for her efforts with BiblioCrunch. Sorry. And also, she's affiliated with Time Magazine and that corporation, so she'll tell us a little bit about how that all came to be and also give us some advice on editing. Thank you for being with us so much. And, and beside her, as always, our friend of the show, Harlan. It's always a pleasure to have you, Harlan.
Thank you, Darcie. And I'm in a good mood today.
There you go.
Under a putting green.
And as always, I am going to make sure that Rudi is put in the most difficult spot of the evening, and he is going to kick off the show with questions.
Well, you know, I don't know if I'm going to kick it off with a question first or a statement that you can then turn into a question. How's that one? That's a new thing for us, isn't it? So here's the thing. I did my homework on the 2 ladies tonight, and here's what I have to say. When we started SlushHeap some, 4 seasons ago, which is actually only 2 years, we go by the Hobbit years. They're shorter. Here's my one. But anyhow, we expected to accomplish a lot of things, and slowly we're getting there. The one thing that I never dreamt of when we started this show is that we would go international, and I should have known better. Here's Darcie, a almost full-blooded American, except for her Native American Indian percentage, right?
Yeah.
Small one. And then here I am with my 0 American heritage and my 100% German. Already we are international. And then as we went along, show after show after show, we found a young lady by chance that actually initially came from Wisconsin, and then she moved herself to Switzerland. So now we have, if she's on tonight, it's 2 o'clock her time already. Hopefully she's watching. And then the next one that came along was Johannes Verbal Parker, who was 100% American born, but 100% German lineage. And so we're really international. So why be any different? Tonight, and like I said, I did my homework. And I'm going to go first with, did you say Miral?
Yes, Miral.
Miral Sattar. Okay.
Yeah.
And, I read about your accomplishments, and it's like, if I was younger and I could remember what I was reading, I could really make a speech out of this. But, I'm in those golden years, and memory is not one of the good things anymore. But still, you're the international person here with us. You were born in Karachi, Pakistan. You came here at a very young age.
Yes,
you moved to New York, and now, of course, you also called New Jersey your home. And, it's like you and I had the same story. It's almost the same thing. I mean, the things you later on talk about, and I read some of your things, especially about the standardized tests, your little quirk on that, and I agree with you 100%. Only those of us who have a different outlook on things, because we're born with a different outlook, can appreciate what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. So, like I said, it's a pleasure having you here tonight. And someplace out of here, I will get a question, believe me. But before I get done, I want to give Annie her little thing, too. And let me tell you something, Annie. Yours is the best kept secret since we began SlushHeap. I looked and looked and looked and looked, and well, first of all, I didn't know how to spell Acorn, because English is my second language, so I was spelling it with an EGG, and that just didn't work, But finally, I located you, and you know what? When I unlocked that hidden world that you created with your 26 plus books, what's the last count?
It's a number.
It's a number. Exactly.
Are we including the ones in the document boxes in the back of the house?
That's pretty good. But your publishing achievements have made you an international sensation in a way, because I'm sure you're not going to tell me they're only published in English.
I am only in English, but we do sell all over the world.
Right, because all over the world they do practice English.
Right.
So, and it's a good thing that they should have something to read that's in English. But so, therefore, I want to even make you a member of in good standing of our International Club of Fine People. And I just made that up. So, with that said, let's go back for a minute to Miral. And your major thing is has to do more with book publishing. Do you yourself write?
Yes, actually, I write freelance. I write articles, and I have maybe 6 or 7 unpublished stories, which they're all written, but I have to go back and.
I was going to say, what do you mean it's just written and that's it?
Yeah, written, reviewed by friends. So I've been writing since I was in high school. So
that's good.
Some of them are fiction, some of them are nonfiction, some of them are stories about my grandparents. So I have a lot of writing. So I haven't actually published them. The goal is to publish them when I have a little more time. And I also actually published the New York City Interactive Dessert Guide in 2012. So that's my one published book.
That's great. So I'm looking forward to the first book that you publish, because I definitely want to add that to my reading list. Which my reading list is not very long, believe me. I hand it to my wife, and then she just gives me the reading results for dummies. In the end. So, but either way, I get the point. But no, I would love to see some of these one day. But we're going to get into what you do along with your BiblioCrunch and the other things you've been involved with. And I'm going to leave that up to Darcie to really get deep into that. Annie, when did you start in writing?
Oh, now you're going to put me on the spot. Back before time.
I know you're 27. Okay, right. I know that. I looked that up.
Right. Seriously, and we'll keep that published out there, surely. Put that on the internet. Seriously, way back in grade school. I mean, it started early on, and slowly it just morphed. It's just part of me. The words are in my head, and they needed to go somewhere, so they went on a paper. And eventually that took form, and I worked hard to improve the writing and get it in a form that would actually be publishable, and here I am.
Now, you see, you notice I did not ask you what your first instrument was that you used, whether it was a typewriter or a keyboard. You know, we leave it
No.
at that.
It
But,
was
you know,
a pencil on my grandmother's
there you
desk. A
go.
pencil on my grandmother's desk.
A lead pencil. There you
Yeah.
go. So, you know, with all that, Darcie, I gave you enough time now that you could put your questions together.
Oh, actually, absolutely. No, that's wonderful. Again, first of all, I want to thank you both for being here. But secondly, really, we want to talk about editing tonight. And although neither one of you are formal editors, you both have a big part in that, play a big part in that, and have experienced that firsthand. So I'm going to start with Annie because she's the first on my screen. Annie, when it comes to editing, what would you recommend for a new writer? When is it time to submit that manuscript to an editor?
Oh, certainly not until you've at least attempted to work on it yourself. And basically, there are three things you need to look at. You need to look at structurally, does your manuscript work? Does your story arc? Does everything go from start to finish in a straight line, or are there deviations? Then you need to look at just generally, have I gotten rid of infinitives and adverbs and that sort of thing? And finally, some copy editing do your editor a favor, get rid of some of those typos. You know, just the very basic things, clean up that manuscript. Certainly, I would submit it to some beta readers, join a writers group, get some feedback before I would go to a full editor. You're not going to write a document and get it out in 2 weeks. It's going to take time. And you need to learn how to be an editor yourself. I'm case in point on that. If I had not learned how to edit my own work, I would never have been published because my creative writing initially was not up to par. I had to learn how to write through learning how to edit.
I think it's interesting that you say that. This is a question that comes up a lot on this show and just out in general. Is it essential to have an editor? What if you're, a strong enough writer and a strong enough editor, maybe you've had editing experience, is it still necessary to hire someone else to look at it?
I always use someone else.
Okay.
I don't know what that's, and I consider, and I do edit and put up books for other authors myself. So I do act as an editor, and I've done technical editing for government agencies. So I'm a qualified editor, but at the same time, a fresh set of eyes is always going to see things that you're not seeing yourself.
All right, I have one follow-up question to that, and then I'm going to switch it over. But you mentioned that you're an editor, and I did know that. Are you the editor for any Acorn Publishing, or do you have others?
I'm one of them.
One of them. Okay, I was going to ask about that. So when somebody comes to you and they want you to publish their book, do they bring it to you in edited form, or do they bring it to you raw?
They bring it to me in all sorts of forms.
Okay.
And then we move forward. But I do choose which properties I wish to work with, and I have a very strong desire to mentor new writers. So sometimes I'm seeing documents that are not maybe as finished as you would normally take them to an editor. But that's part of my joy, is to work with those new authors and bring them through the process.
That's excellent. Well, we couldn't have asked for a better guest then. So, Miral, how about you? What is your advice to a writer who feels that they're strong enough to maybe go it alone? Do they need to hire an editor?
Absolutely. I always love saying not having an editor is like sending a drug out into the market without testing it. And the editor can't be your mom, it can't be your husband, it can't be your brother or sister. It should be someone who has a professional eye and who has worked on enough works to actually recognize whether it's a good work or not.
Okay, and BiblioCrunch, how do they help with the editing? I mean, how do they help with the whole process, but specifically editing?
Okay. Do you mind if I just do like a 1-minute explanation of what BiblioCrunch is?
You're welcome to have 5.
Okay.
Go for it.
So one of the reasons why we started BiblioCrunch is because we noticed that there was a lack of places that you could go to get quality vetted resources for publishing your book. So authors can go online, they can go to BiblioCrunch. We call ourselves the Angie's List for book publishing. That's, an easy way to describe it. So if you're an author or a small publisher, you're looking for an editor, fact checker, proofreader, cover designer, you could post your project, say who you're looking to connect with, what your budget is, and then you get responses and proposals from our vetted list of editors, design, like anyone who works in the publishing industry, and that we vet everybody. We've actually had to kick out a few people because they misrepresented themselves. So our platform kind of matches the authors and the publishers with the types of editors that they're looking for.
That's excellent. Now, when it comes to cost, because this is a question that's going to obviously come up, so we might as well tackle it now while you're talking about that. How much can a person expect to spend on editing?
It really depends. I did a piece for PBS on how much publishers spend on editing, and they spend anything from like $10,000 to $100,000 on a book based on the type, based on what like what condition the book or manuscript is in. But independent authors don't have that kind of money, so there's different ways. You can do a Kickstarter. There's a company called PubSlush where you could raise funds for your book if you like an editor, but the cost varies. So basically, if you're looking for, there's developmental editing and then there's copy editing. And like Annie said, developmental editing, they kind of shape your work, check it for consistency, make sure it flows really well, and that's on the higher end. So you would expect to pay, I mean, according to the Editorial Freelancer Association, $45 to $65 an hour based on the experience of the editor. So if you have a 70,000 word manuscript, which is about 280 pages, and someone's spending 5 pages per hour, and they do 56 hours, the cost could be anywhere from like $25,000 to $18,000, depending on the experience of the editor. So if you have an editor from Simon & Schuster who works at Simon & Schuster or Bloomsbury, they'll charge higher. But the thing is, you don't need to pay that much. That's just what publishers pay.
Right.
But you can barter services if you're a really good cover designer or you're really good at marketing, or you could hire an MFA student and they can kind of edit your work too, but probably not for developmental editing. You could probably hire someone for copy editing. So the second type of editing is copy editing. After you've done the developmental edit and it's in a workable shape, you need to make sure it's consistent, you're using a consistent style guide, grammar is correct, and that's a little cheaper, and it could cost anywhere from like a few $100s to several $1,000s, just based on how much work it needs. And that you can expect to pay $25 to $50 an hour based on numbers that I've seen as the market rate for editors who charge publishers. And of course, like I mentioned before, it all depends on the experience of the editor where they work. You can get editing for cheaper by bartering services or hiring a grad student, but those are the market rates for people who edit professionally. I mean, Annie, I don't know if you agree with me with those numbers, but that's what I've seen.
No, actually, I was just going to ask Annie about that. Annie, what would you say?
I would agree with her on the figures. I think that's very much in line. I would add that there seems to be a mounting trend because of the number of indie authors that are now in the marketplace, where truly professional editors have recognized the need for lower cost, and what they're doing is offering to do so many pages or maybe 1 or 2 chapters for a much lower amount of money to give that indie sort of a start down the road, that then they can take what they learned on those 2 chapters, apply it to the book, and come back and maybe speed up the process going forward. Or they can continue at that rate but pay along as they go, as opposed to coming up with a huge chunk at once.
I've noticed that actually I worked with a client who went to an editor, professional editor, and she saw the cost and was scared away from it, which I think a lot of people are. And that editor went through and picked out specific points. Maybe it was a consistent use of some misspelling, or that the paragraph breaks weren't right, or something like that. I mean, silly things, but that then she could go through and make those corrections throughout the whole book, and then come back and he would do another chapter and find other patterns and do the same thing. So ultimately, it cost her a fraction of what she would have paid. So
Exactly.
I think that's a really good point, because editing is a huge expense. And we've had a lot of guests discuss the fact that they've shied away from it simply for that fact. I mean, they don't have the money to put in. But Miral, you brought up a good point. So have you seen people have a lot of success with raising funds through sites like Kickstarter and PubSlush and Indiegogo and?
Yeah, definitely. We've done events with them. So basically, if you're writing a book, what we recommend is coming up with a book, like finding the professionals that you ideally want to work with, identifying them, getting their costs, and we've had authors who put $7,000 as their costs or just a couple thousand because they just need help for the editing, and they've successfully raised money through Kickstarter or PubSlush. One example is Andrea Phillips. She's a game designer. She crowdfunds every book that she does, and she's able to spend the money on her dream team. PubSlush, you can put down a minimum and a maximum. So even if your minimum is $500 and you raise $500 and your maximum is $3,000, you get the minimum. So it's just money to put towards it. So there's no reason, I think, why you should be scared. You should just try to raise the money, and if it doesn't work out, then work on bartering services. But there are ways to get the quality that you want and that you need, and that is demanded by readers. Because readers do judge books. They judge books not just by cover, but if it's filled with typos and errors, they're going to put it down. So one example is, so my book was, the one that the dessert guide was edited, and I actually didn't think to edit the biography because I thought, why would I need to edit my own biography? And in the first line, someone's like, you have a typo in your biography. And it was really embarrassing. So I immediately updated it and put it back in. It's because I'd read it so many times I didn't catch it. So
it's funny that you say that. I just had to do that with my website and realized that the first paragraph on my website, like the opening page, had a typo in it. Yeah. And it is. It's rather embarrassing. But no, I think that happens a lot. So I guess I did have a follow-up question, and I completely lost that. So we're going to move on to a different avenue slightly. But when it comes to hiring the actual editor, what would you recommend that people ask them? Because they're obviously going to be approached by more than one person interested. So what do you suggest they ask that person?
So you should ask them, well, first make sure that the editor has worked in the genre that you're working on. Like, you shouldn't hire a nonfiction editor if the editor only does young adult books or fantasy novels. You should ask them for developmental editing. Some editors do sample edits, but I think generally for developmental editing, because it's so intensive, they'll edit a sample for like a small fee. You should ask them what other books they've worked on, how comfortable you are talking to them. Like, if you're a phone person, then make sure your editor gets on the phone. I had an author who was a total phone person. She was 81 years old. She didn't like dealing with email, but the editor that she had worked with would never respond to phone calls. So just make sure in advance that you guys have a good synergy. And the way to do that is by doing a sample edit first, or doing a few chapters. And also, like, come up with a payment plan. Is there a deposit that they require? If you're not happy with the edit, then what would be then do you pay? Basically, like a simple contract. You could do it via email. There's templates for contracts. So basically, those are the things that you should ask your editor.
That's great. Annie, would you add anything to that?
Well, I would certainly agree that making sure that you have a personality, friendship going is important, or at least the respect to the professionalism. You certainly can get that through just a conversation. What sort of personality are you getting through that phone or through that email? Is this someone who is expecting to work with you or preach to you? I think that can be very important. You need an editor to be honest with you, but they can do so in a respectful way. You need to feel that as an author, your talents are valuable and respected, and theirs are as well for them. And certainly I would go for, if you can, an arrangement like Miral was saying, where you get a little bit up front and get a chance to see what they do bring to it, and also definitely get references of some sort. I certainly agree with the genre comment, as well as just some basic, what have you done in the past? Because anyone can say they're an editor. What have they really done,
And that's a good point. Would you suggest then that they go and pick up whatever book it is that they, said they worked on and take a look at that personally? Or is that something that the editor will generally supply? How does that work?
I think certainly if an editor uses a book as a reference, that's a good place to start. If they've worked with several authors, a lot of authors will respond to an email, find out what another author thought of the process.
Yeah,
we can always network.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and also one thing to add. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in.
No, you're fine. Go for it.
One thing to add is if an author really likes an editor, they'll put them in their acknowledgments. So you'll know that they work together really well with that author. And not all authors put their editors in the acknowledgments. So they'll thank their editor saying, oh, I love working with so-and-so. And if they do that, then that's a good sign that it's an editor that the author really liked working with.
Excellent.
So if I read this all right,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's basically you recommend that a relationship starts between the author and the editor somewhat, because if there isn't a relationship, if there's a divorce right away, it's going nowhere anyhow.
Yep.
Exactly. And look at it from the standpoint of, a full-length book is a full-length book. Now, today a full-length book is defined many different ways. 40,000 is full-length, where 95,000 used to be considered sort of the norm. But if you're going the distance on a 75 to 95,000 word book, you're going to spend some serious time together.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how I guess first of all, how common is it for that relationship not to work a portion of the way through the book? And then at that point, what is generally the way that's handled? Is there a deposit lost? I mean, do you pay as much as you've already paid? You lose all that? How does that generally work, Annie?
Well, in our situation, it's a little bit different. We've never had that happen. First of all,
good.
So I'm searching for words on that one. I would certainly recommend that what Miral said. It's correct. You should have some sort of working document set up beforehand. Some sort of agreement that allows for an out and actually stipulates if we hit a point and it's not working, what you would actually owe. I think you can learn from anything. I know when I was trying to get published early on, I had editors' comments that I couldn't buy into at all as far as my manuscript went, things like taking my protagonist from a 60-year-old to a 20-year-old. That was not going to work in the book it was in at all. But at the same time, the editor that I would have said handled my work in the worst possible way, I still learned a lot from her. And quite frankly, she made me angry enough that I worked through a problem in the book, and it was then later on very successful. I don't know if that answers your question. Certainly I would get an upfront agreement, and at some point, if it's not working, it needs to be admitted to. It's not going to get any better.
No, actually, you did answer the question, and you also brought up another point. Sometimes editors are going to suggest things that seem outlandish to you or that completely go against what you were aiming to achieve. And, how do you handle that? Do you make those corrections? Do you take that advice? Or do you stand by your own beliefs? How would you suggest a person handle that?
Well, the initial response of the author is generally shock. You don't make your best decisions when you're in shock. So I think time is definitely something you need to do. You need to allow that to simmer in your brain, get past the emotion, come back to your work cold turkey, and really look at it, trying to look at it through their eyes. Why would they make this outlandish comment about your baby? And what you'll usually find is there is at least some truth buried in it. You may not want to go 100% down the road they want you to go, but perhaps you would be well advised to go 50% or 60%. And I think that's where an author has to make the decision, because ultimately that's a decision that may affect whether or not you can get the work published.
That's true. And Miral, what would you add anything to that? I mean, how would you suggest people handle that?
I would say you can probably recognize how well you work together with the sample edit, or if you pay them for a developmental edit.
Right.
Sometimes you hire someone to do copy editing, and they do developmental editing, and you say that's not what I wanted. So, and if they did the sample edit for free, then say, I'm sorry, move on to the next person. Or that's why you pay the deposit. So once you pay the deposit, then you just assume that you're not getting that money back, and then you just agree to start ways.
Okay, excellent. And then when it comes to that point where the editor has made some suggestion that you don't necessarily agree with, how do you handle that scenario?
You choose to accept it, or you choose to not. I mean, edits, at the end of it, it's your book. And especially if you're self-publishing, you have control, so you can't. It's entirely up to you. So you could get a second opinion. I mean, usually if an editor's good, they don't make too many suggestions that are off the wall, because it's a lot of work for them. And I mean, we're talking about traditional self-published books, not traditionally published books. Traditionally published books is a whole other thing. Is you don't really have much say in the editing for, especially big publishers. Is you don't have much say. You don't. Sorry.
Okay. No, actually, no. That's something. That's a point of interest for people, because so the majority of our viewers are people that are new or even just really starting to break into the industry. So when it comes to traditional publishing, what would they expect from the editing phase, of course?
I mean, just based on my experience with publishers, is they say this is the book and this is the editing, and they could completely change it, and they usually do completely change the book into a tone that they want, and especially like the bigger publishers. And unless the author has already proven themselves to have like a huge market or huge reading through books that they're already published. So I would expect to get your work changed drastically. You might not agree with the changes to the edits. You might not agree with the cover. You might not agree with the marketing plan. So I always say self-publishing is always a good first option, because you have control over everything.
It's very true.
Right, I would agree with that. I think when you go traditional editing, you need to recognize that once you've sold that book, it isn't yours, except for marketing down the road. That's always yours. But as far as the editing, that book is no longer your baby, it's theirs. You sold your child. When you're dealing with indie editing, I tell the authors that I work with, and I don't know if this helps or not, but I describe to them, you've written a teapot. My job is to shine the teapot. My job is not to turn it into a chair. Because they're not wanting that. That's why they're going indie. They want more control. They want a little more decision. They want their money faster, and they want to have those choices. They're not really looking for me to dramatically change the entire focus of their work to suit what I see as a market for my business. It's their business that they're trying to get help for subcontracted services for. And that puts a whole different spin on the process.
Actually, while you're bringing that up, can you tell us a little bit about Acorn Publishing and what people can expect if they come to you?
Well, if they come to me, the group here, they're going to certainly have someone who respects the fact that they're an independent publisher. We do feel very strongly that as an independent author, you are a business. And that's one of the things that I counsel to them day one. My background is very strong in the business world. I've owned several large businesses and managed others, and this is a business, and you're going to have to market it. You're going to have to prepare your product. You're going to have to make sure that you have an audience and that you know that audience. Every single step along the way, if you're going to be as successful as you truly want to be, you're going to have to be knowledgeable. You're going to have to do the research and development. You're really going to have to think of yourself as a business owner and producing a product and moving it down that industrial line. At the end of the day, that can be a whole lot of fun because it's a creative process, but you cannot skip those steps.
Yeah.
Excellent. And you kind of help walk them through all of that? Is that...
We do, because that's why I started Acorn Publishing. I mean, I could have published my own stuff forever and not bothered with another company. In fact, I had sworn I would never have another company for a number of reasons. I didn't want payroll, I didn't want a building, and the world of virtual business has made it a lovely opportunity for me. I don't have to have some of those things. But I do it in large part, and so do those that primarily work with me, because they want to mentor new authors. And so we mentor probably more than a traditional editor would.
Okay, great. Well, and the reason why I asked is because that's sort of, the reason why I look to both of you actually is because the audience that we're speaking to are really going to be those who don't really know how to get started. They've barely gotten their feet wet. They need, some direction. So basically both BiblioCrunch and Acorn Publishing offer that sort of first step. Out of the gate once they've got that written. So I want to come back briefly because we talked about it last week a little bit, and you guys made mention of it. Can you, Annie, tell a little bit more about what the difference between, a beta reader and an editor are? What makes one person one thing and another person another thing?
Right. A beta person, a beta reader basically is someone that you personally know. And it can be someone through Twitter. You don't have to know them face to face, but someone who you feel will read your manuscript, or at least part of your manuscript, and give you an honest opinion of it. Now, having said that, I Twitter out. Your family, your friends, I agree with Miral exactly. Your family, your friends are not probably going to be your best beta readers, because they're not going to want to hurt your feelings. And sometimes you need to hear the bad stuff, because if you don't hear what's wrong, you're never going to get it right. And that's the purpose of a beta reader, is to let you know, give you that other set of eyes. Now, an editor is there because they're a highly skilled professional. When they tell you something, they're bringing all that background to the picture. Are they gods? No. Do they know everything? Absolutely not. Are they even going to know everything for your book or even for your genre based on their experience? Maybe not. That's your choice. But they do come from that professional experience background, and they bring a lot more, in my estimation, to it than what we tend to think of as a beta reader. And I would like to, since Miral mentioned her situation, what she can offer to people, I'd like to bring up that on Acorn Publishing, we've just started what we're hoping will be very helpful, which is an interactive question and answer thing with two very celebrated authors who are hidden behind the names of pen and ink, with guest quills coming in, where individuals who are interested in getting specific questions answered can put those questions up there, and they will be covered at some point in a session. So it's a way to get some good free information.
That's excellent. So coming back to the beta reader versus the editor, Miral, when you vet people, what do you look for? I mean, who makes a good editor? How do you know that they're going to be worthwhile?
Typically, so we ask a series of questions, and then we ask them to fill out a form, and then we check to see what type of house they've worked for, if they've worked for a publisher, who they've worked for. We check their LinkedIn, we Google them for negative reviews, we check to make sure they have a professional website, and we check their references. So we vet them pretty thoroughly. I mean, we vet them the best that we can. Occasionally, some people will slip through the cracks, and then we'll kick them out. So,
right.
But yeah, so I mean, we do the pre-research, but at the end of the day, it's up to the author to pick the editor. So that works best with them. So even though we've vetted like all these editors, it's up to the author and his or her responsibility that they pick the editor that works best with them. And we guide them through how to do that. So sorry, another little plug is the audience. It's we have our VIP service, and it's $10 a month, and we just kind of answer. We'll walk you through the entire process. We'll walk you through the differences, different editing, the different processes of publishing a book, and we answer any questions that you have about book publishing. So, because we get a lot of questions, like sometimes I get questions and I don't even know the answers to. They're really complex questions at ISBN, so I'll email Bowker and be like, hey guys, I was like, I don't know the answer to this question, but we have a VIP author who wants to know. So yeah, it's like there's so many questions, but it's the responsibility of the author to do their homework and do their research and make sure that it's a good fit for them.
Okay. And the reason why I asked too is because you had mentioned like hiring an MFA student or something like that. First of all, does BiblioCrunch get into anyone that's sort of an unexperienced editor? So I know a lot of people in the magazine publishing industry, and I know them to be really good copy editors, and I'm confident that they will do a good copy edit of your book because they worked on my book. So they might not necessarily have worked on full-length books, but they are professionals and they're pretty good. And like certain schools have really good copy editors. My NYU students are great and thorough. Columbia, the students are great and thorough. Pace University, like all the New York City schools, the new school, like I know the copy editing classes that they have to take are really vigorous and thorough. So I know that they're kind of already pre-vetted because I've taken those classes too. So, but we do say is they'll say that I am a new editor, and sometimes like we have authors who are like, I only have $200 to edit my book, and I'll say, well, are you comfortable with a grad student doing it? Because a grad student will probably do it for the money, and you'll get a really thorough job, but they're not a book editor, so we do have that in our platform too.
And every editor has to edit their first book.
Yeah.
Right, exactly, and that's sort of what I was touching on. Is it safe to go after that newbie? I mean, how much of a risk are you taking by going after someone who's brand new?
Well, it's not such a risk because they're not charging several $1,000s. They're charging like peanuts compared to what these big editors. So it's like a win-win situation for everyone, I think.
Very true.
It makes the editors who charge more really angry, but like Annie said, everyone has to edit their first book. So.
But, and I think that that's a good point. We talked about that actually when it came to book cover design at one point. We had one that was relatively experienced and one that was sort of just out of the box. And the difference in what they charge, but I like you said, I mean, how are you going to get your feet wet if you're trying to charge these prices that are set by the, by the most experienced individuals? So it's a point worth talking about, because if you don't have the budget to go into it and hire, a $10,000 editor, what are you going to do? So
it's going to scare you away from publishing a book. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But I have a little. I've been sitting here now, and for 20 minutes we've been actually talking about editors and all that. And I guess I got to put it in layman's terms. Is the best way to do it. Really, editors. There is no editorial degree that you can get from a university or from a college. No, it comes under what, English? Is that where the best thing you could have taken in order to become an editor, so that you know the structure of a sentence, etc., etc., etc. Right? So the thing is, it's not like being an engineer where you take a brick and you put another brick on top of that, and by the time you have 5,000 bricks there, you have a house. There's a guideline you go by. So there are no guidelines per se in the editorial world, because it is an opinion in a sense. And has anybody ever? And this is me. I'm the guy that looks at these things and tries to come up with the strangest answers. But I'd love to do a book one day then, and send the same manuscript to at least 2 different editors, and see what I get back. You know, and I think that's what you're saying even, is, you know, as you speak to that editor, if that editor comes back, and I thought, honest to God, Annie, the way you said it, is if you know, you made a teapot, and it's for you as an editor to polish it. I thought that was the best example you could give. And they come back with a chair. What does that do for you? And I've heard that so many times where that has happened. You know, we even Darcie and I, we sent our book out for editors to read, and what came back, and they didn't do anything. It didn't cost me anything. It was an opinion, you know. But what they came back with is not, first of all, what I had in mind. Secondly, because you know, we wrote a historical fiction, which is based on fact. Just some of the things had to be changed to protect the innocent. There, you can't give me an outline and say you have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, because history doesn't do it that way. Sometimes history mixes it up, you know. And yet the people that I talk to, oh no, you got to have that. The plot demands that. Otherwise, the plot doesn't work. Well, excuse me, in history, there is no plot, you know. And that's the thing that I went to the wrong one. That's my best answer to myself. I went to the wrong one. I should have gone to somebody who has done historical fiction, and I think you've mentioned that several times. You wouldn't want to go to a YA editor if yours was a just who knows what, you know. So really, that's what it's all about. We're getting their opinion, which is very professional. Don't get me wrong. You know, they certainly have more in their credentials than I have. So in a sense, yes, if they come up with an idea that stays within the realm of the story, but they want to change it, I should listen. Am I wrong on that?
No, I think that would be right. As long as what you're wanting is to make your manuscript better, but it's still your manuscript. You know, they didn't write the story. You've come to them. I tweet out to my Twitter followers when they're talking about how many words they've gotten or whatever. May your words flow like warm chocolate, and your edits make your manuscript sing. And they love it, you know. But I mean that. That's what editing is supposed to do.
Right.
It isn't supposed to rewrite the book, although sometimes rewriting is a necessary part of the process. And I would agree with you, too, that some types of books like the historical fiction may not be a straight shot by an arrow from a bow to a target. As long as the road is, the book is moving forward down the road, that road can sometimes effectively curve, as long as those curves are still taking it forward.
Okay.
It can't pause, it can't go, it shouldn't go backwards, but it can, as long as it's moving forward, you know, be a curvy road.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love the answers. So, Rudi, we are 10 minutes from the end of the show, and for those who haven't watched the show before, what we like to do is give everyone a couple minutes to add to anything that we might have missed in the show. I know editing is an absolutely huge topic, and I know that we have barely scratched the surface of it, so I'm sure you might have things to add. If people out there have questions and they want to follow up after the show, we'd be more than happy to get those answers for you. But with that said, Annie, I always go to the first person on my screen, which happens to be you. So I'm going to give you a moment just to tell us about what you're doing, about how people can find you, and, you know, add anything that you might want to the topic.
Okay, well, they can certainly find me at Annie_Acorn on Twitter. They can also find me through @CharlotteKent20, which is the pseudonym that I use when I'm writing the Captain's Point series in collaboration with Juliet Hill. They can certainly visit my website at AnnieAcorn.com or AnnieAcornPublishing.com. We are working very hard to make the Annie Acorn Publishing website interactive and a go-to place for people to get advice, to see what's going on as far as some events, to ask questions, and certainly to meet our authors and see what some of their backgrounds are. So I would encourage people to check that out as a resource for them going forward.
Annie, let me ask you one more question. If somebody were to want to submit a manuscript for review by Annie Acorn, how would they do that?
Okay, at this point on the website it says that we're not currently accepting manuscripts, but assuming that you don't have 6 million people watching this tonight, I will say that if you wish to submit a manuscript, I would certainly entertain an email, and the contact information is on there.
Excellent.
Okay, if you've cared enough to listen to this show, then you've come down the road a fair piece, and you're serious about what you're trying to achieve, and I would take that into account.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Miral, how about you?
You can find me on BiblioCrunch, BiblioCrunch. We're on Twitter too. My personal Twitter is Miral Sattar, MIRALSATTAR, and I write about self-publishing for PBS Media Shift, and also for our blog, which is blog.bibliocrunch.com. And if you're in New York City, or if you're really active on Twitter, we host Indie Chat every night on Tuesday, 9 p.m., and tonight we're talking about Book Expo America. And if you're in New York, we have a meetup called the New York Self-Publishers Meetup, and we have about several hundred members, and we meet every month, and we invite different guests to talk and present and educate our authors.
Excellent. Thank you.
Oh, and my email is miral@bibliocrunch.com if anyone is interested. And if you have any self-publishing questions or questions about anything related to book publishing, feel free to drop me a line.
Okay, great. And let me ask one more question about BiblioCrunch. When somebody goes to the site, how did they get started? Are they going to create a profile on there, or how does that whole process get kicked off?
Yeah, they create an author profile, and then they post a project. And once they post a project, they should start receiving responses from editors within a few hours. And then they can browse through the profiles, browse through their reviews and ratings, and pick the person who's best for them.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much. And Harlan, I apologize sincerely. We have gone through the whole show, and we have yet to hear from you. And I did not mean to leave you out. And I know that you have a very strong opinion when it comes to editing. And you are more than welcome to share that now.
And he's still awake, too.
Yeah, I'm still awake. I'm in a coma. I'm comatose. But I'm listening. I am a writer who does not go out for editing. I do my own editing. I don't make line item mistakes. If there would be a problem beyond line editing, it's a matter of opinion. And my opinion matters, not anyone else's. I have access to a very good mind who is I call him my Omega reader, because I let him read my books after I've published them. And I spoke with him the other day about my latest published book, and he was painfully remorseful of hurting my feelings by what he was telling me. And he didn't need to be, but it didn't stop the emotional flow in him. He thought he was devastating me with what he said, but it was all opinion. It was his opinion. He liked the section about the male. He thought it was nicely written and everything was fine, but when he got to the female character, which is all one section of the book, he lost interest. Now, I don't know if he lost interest because he didn't relate to the character, or if he had some other reason. I don't know what, and he couldn't nail it. So I chalked it up to opinion, and it doesn't matter to me. The book is already there. I write what I want the reader to read, and I write it the way I want it written. And that won't be violated by an outside editor. I'm the editor. I'm responsible to and for everything I write. So there are two people here who use editing and swear by it, and another who doesn't use editing and still does a whole lot of swearing.
And I know, you know what, Harlan, there are a lot of people like you. I will give Harlan this. I don't know that there are a lot of writers out there that could be as clean. I've read Harlan's book, and it's clean. It's very clean, and by that I mean just the basic grammar, you know, those basics. I think that the majority of writers get lost in their thoughts and are writing faster than their brain can even function, you know, properly, you know, comprehend what they're writing, and you know, by default make mistakes. So that said, I don't think that everyone can do what you do, but I completely respect your opinion on it, and I think that it's cool that we always have devil's advocate on our show. So, Harlan, anything that you want to share about your own personal writing at the moment?
I started another novel. I'll probably have it done in 5-6 months.
Excellent. And your other one was just recently released. When you released it in February?
Geez, I don't know. Yeah, probably something like that. I released 2 books, one of short stories and one of a novella length.
Excellent. Okay, so Rudi, it's your turn.
Well, before it gets to be my turn, I don't know if you noticed that we did have one of our audience guests ask a question, or actually give a comment. So you want to take that real quick, and we'll go through that, and then I'll get my thoughts together.
Okay, yeah, excellent. Actually, she wrote twice, and I apologize, Marla, for missing this. Marla has been a regular fan of the show, and we really appreciate the fact that we have people out there that are willing to watch and ask questions. So she, first of all, she said that Miral made a great visual with her untested drugs example. So then she went on to say, before an indie hires an editor, she or he should go to writing conferences, join critique groups, and get your work vetted by smart readers. You will save money in the long run if you let the literary universe help you as it has for authors since we began publishing. So thank you, Marla. I really appreciate the time put in, and Marla is a wonderful resource as well. If you are not yet friends with her, or if you have not found her on social media, it's Marla Miller, and she has a lot of great advice. She's constantly posting on the topic, so please check her out. Okay, Rudi, you're up.
I'm up. Well, you know, I don't have much to say because, again, I sat here, and I'm going to have to go over the video. You know, I'll wait till the video comes out, and then I'll watch that again and learn some more. But the only thing I wanted to do today, tonight actually, was to do a short commercial. You know, we at SlushHeap have grown constantly. We have reinvented ourselves every chance we got. What started out as one thing, SlushHeap.com, is now 5 or 6 different things. And yes, crowdfunding is one of our things that we've had on before, and we're investigating for our own use. And both Kickstarter and PubSlush are well known to us, as well as Indiegogo. So all that said, I began, because I am not an author, and I'll be the first one, you know, if you haven't figured that out yet, boy, I'm doing really good. But, you know, I am a teller of stories. And one day I ran across this beautiful young lady by the name of Darcie, and she said that she knew how to put my words that came out of my mouth on paper. And so she did. And that's what was our book. And we went along, and we're now in the process of a second book. And I actually got a letter today from someone that it was one of those letters that's lost in the mail for a long time. And by the time you get it, the individual that wrote it already had died. And the thing he said on there, he gave me an avenue for another book. And he says, Rudi, you have to write this. People must know this. I know I'm getting to be too old. I can't do it anymore. But he says, you have to do this. And so with that, what I did a couple of weeks ago, I started out my own little show within SlushHeap. And I call it Grandpa's Attic. And what it is my grandpa, because I was German, it was my Opa. I was not lucky enough to have met him. He died the year before I was born. But all my cousins would tell me how he used to take them up into the attic of the house, and there was his old rocking chair, and there was a captain's, whatever you call it, with all his treasures in it from World War One. He was a cavalry officer in World War One, so his saber was in there, his pith helmet, and everything else. And I took that as a background, and all the stories that I know were told to me verbally, not in books, verbally. My grandmother would sit me down and tell me the stories of where I came from, who I was, and where I was going. And so with that, I started Grandpa's Attic. And my guests, I hope, will be people that think along my line. And I already have two that I know of definitely that are that way. They're storytellers. They have written books. And probably their books could be doing a lot better if they weren't the size of Hawaii, you know, or something like that. And mine would have been if it wasn't for Darcie keeping the words down. You know, you can see how long I can talk. But to give you a little idea of what Grandpa's Attic is all about, I sat here today and in almost in Twitter style, not quite, I didn't make it, because I don't do Twitter, 140 characters, no. No matter, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, as written by Charles Dickens. It is about time. And that's what my whole thing is based on. And if when I get this done and I get it posted next week, if you get a chance to go to YouTube and go to SlushHeap, it'll be there. It'll explain to you why I say it is about time. You know, there's a lot. There can be a lot of meanings to that, but I want to explain my meaning to it. And hopefully, people will follow us there as well as they follow us on SlushHeap. And you know what? I want to thank everybody, the people that sat out there tonight, and hopefully got a few chuckles from us. Even though Harlan and I were very quiet. You know, we kept those chuckles to ourselves. But ladies, you were fantastic. You were everything that Darcie said you would be. You know, you're professional. You know your stuff. That's what I like. You know, when somebody comes and says, "Hey, you know, I'm not necessarily. It's not that I'm the person. I am a person that can help you out with this." And that's what it's really all about. And then, again, there comes that relationship. You know, if that relationship doesn't work, then all you say and all I hear are two different things. You know, that relationship has to work. And that we were on the same wavelength. We get the same out of everything that is said and heard. And you know what? Like I said, I heard a lot tonight. And I'm glad that we had you two on. And hopefully in the future, you know, you'll be kind enough to come back and see us again. Because I know what's going to happen. We're going to get questions and questions and questions. We'll just have to write them down, put them in our archive, and have you back on again. You know, but I really want to thank you both for being here tonight. This has been a real pleasure. Darcie?
Yeah, thank you very much, both of you. And I have to say, if I'm to be perfectly honest, this is one of the episodes that I was the most excited about doing, both because of the topic. I think that it's something that really hits home with a lot of indie authors, but also because you have two fantastic guests on, and I don't say that to embarrass you, but just to say, I mean, it's really, really wonderful that we can pull people in here that are not only obviously experts in this industry, but also willing to help new and upcoming authors. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate it. Really glad that you could be here. And I am not going to hold this any longer because we are going over. And as Miral said, she is due to be on Indie Chat tonight. So join her on Twitter. And the rest of us will see you later. Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night, Darcie.
Good night, Darcie.
Good night.